Hello again, and welcome to the 267th presentation of Forum for a Better Understanding. And this is a unique program. It never could have happened before because it's being based on a talk given by the President when he spoke in Cairo on June 4th. It was a monumental, long-awaited presentation to the Islamic world about how the President wanted to present the United States in its relationship with Islam. And I think it was very well received, but we're going to have a panel today from two of my friends, one Islamic, one Jewish, to kind of look at it in their own way, speaking for themselves, to respond to anything the President said or didn't say about the situation. There were 7 main points that he raised, and we'll maybe look at 4 or 5 of them at least. But right now, let's introduce our 2 guests. My first one is Reza Nekumanesh, who is a very active member at Islamic Cultural Center of Fresno and is the founder of Sajad, which is an Islamic youth program that he is very, very much committed to. He does like to work with youth. On his side is Jay Trachman, a famous broadcaster in Fresno for a long time, a substitute teacher now in the Fresno Unified School District, and also a very active member at Temple Beth Israel, the Reform Synagogue here in town in Fresno. Reza and Jay, it's great to have you back on a forum. Maybe you should introduce yourselves and let the audience, the viewers, know who you are and maybe why this topic and why you would like to be on the panel today.
Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon all of you. First of all, thank you for having us here to be able to discuss this wonderful topic. As you said, they could have never been discussed before because probably no president before has ever made such an attempt to bridge the gap between the West and Islam. And that's why it was so important for me to come and be able to talk with you, to give you my point of view, and then maybe share the point of view of a few other Muslim organizations about how we really appreciate what the president said and how we hope that his dream of peace amongst all people can become a reality.
Thank you, Reza, for being on the panel again.
Thank you.
Jay.
Peace, as defined by the word shalom among my people in the Hebrew language, doesn't simply mean the absence of conflict. It has many other meanings woven into it. Importantly, wholeness, completeness. There are implications of brotherhood, of permanence. It's not just that we're not throwing stones at each other. And the peace that our president seems to be seeking would come at a very, very high price. And I think people need to respond to it and point out the fallacies in what he had to say, the pandering, the craven pandering that went on in this speech. I'm afraid President Obama played fast and loose with the truth and gave credence to mythology that exists only in the Muslim world. People have to stand up and say, no, wait a minute. This is not only mistaken, it could be dangerous. For instance, he equated the Holocaust with the Palestinian refugee problem. Those two things are not equatable. It's, when you unmask it, when you strip it down to the basics, you're comparing someone who has taken away your home for whatever reason, and in this case, the one who took away the home, according to Israeli history, would be the Arab leaders in the 1948 war, where they said to Arab residents, vacate your homes, get out of here quickly, we're going to bomb the Israelis into, or gun down the Israelis into oblivion, and when they're gone, you can come back and have your home. And hundreds of thousands of Arabs left their homes in what is now Israel. They didn't ever expect that Israel would come out on the winning side in that war. But when you ask who is responsible for the Palestinian refugee problem, it's hard to pin it on Israel. In any event, to equate someone taking your home away, whomever it might have been, and someone killing you, those are not quite the same things. I have more to say about this, but I want to give
I
my
can see
colleague.
that this is going to be one of those most intense forums we have ever had. Right now we're going to go to a safe place actually and play a clip from Religion and Ethics a month ago, which actually had two other people responding with Bob Abernathy to the questions about their responses to this discussion. Let's go to that clip right now, Greg.
We have a discussion today of President Obama's speech to the Muslim world and the reaction to it. Kate Seeley was a longtime Middle East correspondent based in Beirut. She's now a vice president of the Middle East Institute in Washington. Vali Nasser is a professor of international relations at the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts University and is also serving as a special advisor to Ambassador Richard Holbrooke, who is leading U.S. diplomacy in Afghanistan and Pakistan. Professor Nasser speaks here for himself, not for the U.S. government. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Professor Nasser, let's begin with you. The reaction throughout the Muslim world, what do you hear?
Very, very positive. There's no doubt that the speech exceeded expectations from the vast majority of Muslims, all the way from Indonesia to Nigeria. Even though the president did not go deeply into policy, I think the level of respect and empathy and seriousness that he showed in terms of engaging the Muslim world was very well understood by the public and very much appreciated.
On the other hand, Kate, there was a lot of criticism, wasn't there, or some guarded comments from officials?
Well, there were. I think people are, there's some who are holding reservations. They want to see if he's going to translate his words into action. There was also some disappointment on the part of democracy activists who wanted him to be tougher, let's say, on Arab leaders, who wanted to put more pressure on them. And there were some who wanted him to be tougher on the Israelis. But by and large, people were very positive and felt that he went out of his way to try to bridge this gap between America and the Muslim world.
What could be, Professor, what could be the deeds now that would satisfy the people to whom Obama was talking?
I think one of the ways to look at this is that the speech or the series of speeches he's given is a deed in itself. In other words, our habit in this region is that administrations come up immediately off the bat with a plan of action for something, whether it's Iran, Arab-Israeli issue, Afghanistan. This president has understood that there's no point trying a new policy before you change the context in which you engage the other side. So I think his very first policy, his very first deed has been to gain trust. And I think the first way in which he has to be measured is by trust. And I think to Kate's point, which is correct, I think he's been successful enough that some actors like the Iranian government or Hezbollah or the Muslim Brotherhood may worry that he's quickly changing the game on them very fast and effectively. And some of the reaction we're seeing has to do with that.
But a specific deed now to follow this, Kate, what could that be?
Well, I mean, everybody's waiting to see what he's going to do vis-a-vis the Arab-Israeli peace process, what steps he's going to take to pressure the Israelis perhaps to halt settlement building. This is what Arabs and Muslims are looking for, concrete deeds with regard to the peace process.
Did you
frankly.
feel on that he was tilting a little bit toward the Palestinians?
Well, he acknowledged the Holocaust, he acknowledged the suffering of the Jews, and he also acknowledged the suffering of the Palestinians. And this was really a first. Many presidents have acknowledged the need for a two-state solution, but few have said, you know, I feel for the suffering of the Palestinian refugees. He won high marks for that.
I was struck by the language, especially the references to the Quran and other phrases that come out of the Islamic tradition. That can't help but have helped him in the Muslim world.
Absolutely. I mean, there's ways of using the Quran, and then there are ways of using the Quran. Often Western commentators or leaders usually use the Quran in order to hit the Muslims on the head with it. In other words, you use their own scripture in order to preach to them very selectively. This president, I think, has used a very light touch in terms of trying to use the Quran to convince the Muslims that he believes they belong inside the tent. that there is no such thing as a Judeo-Christian tradition with the Muslim standing out there. The way he used the Quran, particularly at the end, was to say that there is an Islamic Judeo-Christian civilization, that your values are the same as our values and our values are the same as your values. And look, here is the example by referring to all three scriptures at the same time. And I think that's what's most effective.
Yeah. And as you said, this attempt to build respect with the audience he was talking to is the first step in new policy.
Well, absolutely. If you looked at the Bush administration, their approach was that you're either with us or you're against us. So it's either black or white. And the burden was on Muslims to prove themselves innocent. In other words, they're guilty unless proven innocent. And they set down a set of markers which basically meant abandon your faith, change it, reform it, change everything, and then you'll be sort of acceptable. This president is starting from a very different point of view. First of all, he's creating a massive gray area in the middle, that there's not either us or you, that we have a common arena in which we share. And the burden is not on Muslims to prove that they're a religion or that their religion matters or that their values are world values. He immediately off the bat said, I agree with that, and I give you better examples than you can yourselves.
Yes, and if I might add to that, I mean, he was very sensitive about language and Muslim sensitivities. He never once used the word terrorist, because over the past 8 years, the word terrorist has become synonymous with the word Muslim and Islam. So he avoided these words, and he used language that people applauded when he talked about the Prophet Muhammad. He said, peace be upon him. That was very important for Islamists and traditionalists watching his speech.
What about nuclear weapons? What can you divine in the speech about how that problem can be addressed now?
Well, that's a problem that has to be solved at the negotiation table. And we will not see where it's going until the day the United States and Iran are sitting at the table and discussing things. But I think the president is trying to make it easier, or in some ways compel the Iranian government not to hide behind excuses that the Americans are not sincere, they're not serious, there's no point talking to them. To say that, look, there is a pathway for you to come in, and the United States is going to engage Iran over these very serious issues from a position of respect.
Mm-hmm. Kate, did you hear anything from people you know in the Muslim part of the world about what we're talking about? Did anybody say anything to you about it?
Oh, absolutely. I had some blogger friends from Saudi Arabia say that they were thrilled by this speech because it wasn't directed toward Arab leaders. Obama never once mentioned the name of Hosni Mubarak, the host. He was speaking to the youth, to the women, to the people of the Arab world. And that's very rare in a region where people don't feel like they're being addressed by their leaders. Here was this leader of the world's superpower saying, I care about you, I want to help you, your education is important, let's invest in you. That was profoundly appreciated.
Many thanks to you, Kate Seeley, and to Professor Vali Nasser.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We're going to take a break right now, but 1 minute we'll be back to discuss with Jay and Reza not only what the president said, but their own reaction and response to it. Stay tuned.
KNXT thanks all its loyal viewers and respected businesses who have supported your Catholic television station. Now you can support KNXT with program underwriting by having your name, your company's name, or organization associated with your favorite program. Detailed information about you or your company will appear before and after each program or day part you select. Keep the quality and spiritual message alive and make a difference. Call 559-488-7440 today or go online at knxt.tv to find out more about program underwriting on KNXT.
Having heard now clips from the commentators and our own opening presentations, I wonder if Reza has anything to further the conversation based on how you even thought before you came in today from what you've been thinking about this.
Sure. First of all, so many great points were brought up in the clip, many things that I would have liked to talk about, but I don't need to anymore. I think President Obama, he spoke to the heart of the Muslims. He spoke to the problems that we face in our community and the problems that the world faces dealing with a pluralistic world. I would like to respond to Mr. Trachman about something. I don't really know if President Obama equated the Holocaust with what happened to the Palestinian people at all. First of all, he made a very strong statement about the Holocaust and about the Jewish people's right to a homeland and existence.
Reza, if I may
then he
interrupt
said,
for just a moment.
Yeah, then what he said is, I think his exact word was, I'm sorry, on the other hand, it is also undeniable that the Palestinian people, Muslims and Christians, have suffered in a pursuit of a homeland for more than 60 years. They've endured the pain of dislocation. And the pain that he feels is not just with people losing their homes, but it's the pain of people being killed. Let's not get it twisted into thinking that people haven't been killed, because they have been killed and have been so for 60 years without rest. Not to take away from any of the suffering in which the Jewish people faced, not by Arabs in the history and by Arabs in the history, including terrorist attacks by Palestinians, which maybe no right-minded human being could defend. But Obama didn't want to take away from the suffering that Palestinians have suffered at the hands of the Israeli state. Sorry, go ahead.
The first half of the sentence which you quoted was, the Jewish people were persecuted. Anti-Semitism culminated in an unprecedented Holocaust. 6 million Jews were killed. On the other hand, it is also undeniable that the
Sure,
Palestinians...
on the other hand.
Okay,
On
if
the
that
other
isn't
hand.
equivalence, I don't know what is. Now, President Obama said that he came to Cairo to tell the truth. I went to a Catholic university for 2 years, Jim. I know a little bit about truth. Truth is, there can't be different contradictory truths depending on what your viewpoint or your experience is. Truth is truth. A is A. Contradictions cannot exist in nature at the same time in the same place. Let's look at some of Mr. Obama's truths. Early in his speech, he said, America is home to 7 million Muslims. This is pure and outrageous fantasy. Nobody believes that number, other than the Muslim Brotherhood, the Council on American Islamic Relations.
Anybody who looks at an American census would also believe that, Jim.
It's
as well as
double
you know.
any credible account. In addition, he said, Islam has been a part of America's story since the beginning. Yeah, since the Barbary pirates in our first war. He then goes on to talk about the intolerable pain and suffering of the Arab peoples for more than 60 years, and says nothing about the intolerable pain and suffering of Jews and Israelis for more than 60 years. In this truth, he said he'd be telling,
Sir,
he never once used the word terrorism.
You quoted him. And he did mention the pain and suffering of Jewish.
Oh, yeah.
I think what I would say, unfortunately, I didn't think it was going to turn this way, but I think possibly we're dealing with somebody, the co-guest, that he doesn't want to face reality of what is going on in this world. There are more Muslims in this world that want peace than there are Muslims who don't want peace. From your statements, I do believe, and I don't need to hear anything else, that what you have said has proven yourself to be somebody that has something against Muslims. Because me as a Muslim, I would never say about Jewish people what you said about Muslims. But if I could, I'm going to divert back to Obama's speech and many of the positive and negative things that he did say. First of all, he did say that Jewish people have suffered, and he said Palestinian people have suffered. You know what? Both of those statements are true. Jewish people suffered throughout history, and Palestinian people have suffered throughout the last century. Those are not contradictory statements. They are both truths.
But
and
they are not
anybody
equivalent.
who he didn't say there. He said, on the other hand, semantics. That has nothing to do with equating. I don't think he equates 6 million
I don't think-
Jews.
It was the same sentence
Actually not. I mean, one thing, Jay, that is the sentence that was skipped that I think people would want to hear this because they might say, what did he say? He said something that was glossed over. 6 million Jews were killed, more than the entire Jewish population of Israel today. Denying that fact is baseless, ignorant, and hateful.
Right.
Threatening Israel with destruction or repeating vile stereotypes about Jews is deeply wrong and only serves to evoke in the minds of Israelis this most painful of memories while preventing the peace that the people of this region deserve. So that was a big sentence, Jay.
Right.
I think you've got to not say he jumped to the next sentence. Then he said, on the other hand, it's also undeniable. Then it almost becomes a coherent vision. It wasn't only this and that. He also bridged it by saying, you know what? The Israelis have suffered a lot in this too.
Every Jew I know read that as moral equivalence. That's the way it sounded to me. That's the way it sounded, I think, to most Americans. Here we have this problem, and here we have that problem. They are not equivalents. Also, there are so many things he failed to mention to his Cairo audience. For instance, the 800,000 Jews living in Arab lands prior to 1948 who were driven out upon the first war of Israel. There are virtually no Jews in most of those Arab lands now. Iran being an exception.
Let me ask you a question. Intelligent human beings, you and I and everybody else in the audience and in the world, do we stop? Do we talk about history and fight over history? Or do we say, history is history? It was absolutely wrong. Nobody in my lineage and nobody that believes what I believe did to your people what happened. Now it's time to say, okay, nobody else needs to suffer. This world has become globalized due to the internet and television, telephone, the access, the easy access for every human being that can get on an airplane. Now it's time to move on. And I think that's what Obama did. Obama mentioned history. Obama mentioned what's going on now. And Obama's address wasn't to the Jewish people. And I do believe if his address was to the Jewish people, he would mention the Holocaust, and he would also mention that Israel still needs to stop what's going on to the Palestinian refugees. It's knowing your audience and it's speaking to them. But I do believe that for this world to become any better, we need to acknowledge history. Anybody who says that the Holocaust didn't happen is a little bit crazy, but it's time to move on. It's time to build gaps, build bridges, and just as Obama said, there's a story in the Quran called Isra. It deals with Prophet Muhammad going to heaven, and he said, we need to be like that story in which Muhammad, Abraham, Moses, and Jesus stood together in prayer. And until that happens, I think we can see nothing but hatred, we can see nothing but sadness, and that's nothing that's going to help this world move on to a better place, a place full of peace, in the true sense of shalom, as you mentioned, a peace where not just I'm not throwing a rock at you and you're not throwing a rock at me, but when we see each other on the street, we can smile and shake hands and walk away.
So far, this has not happened. History matters, Reza. History matters because it's being taught in the madrasas all over the Muslim world.
Who told you that?
I have read it in countless sources.
The children. Was it the same source that you used, the National?
I have used many sources, sir.
That's what I was wondering.
Children are being taught in madrasas all over the world that Jews are pigs. They're also being taught, and here's where it really matters, that Israel is a European colony in the midst of Dar Islam, the Islamic world. Well, I would like to take a moment, if I may, and read you a quote. This was written several years ago, so it refers to when the land was still called Palestine. And the quote goes like this: Palestine of today, the land we know as Palestine, was peopled by Jews from the dawn of history until the Roman era. It is the ancestral homeland of the Jewish people. They were driven from it by force by the relentless Roman military machine and for centuries prevented from returning. At different periods, various alien people succeeded them, but the Jewish race had left an indelible impress upon the land. Today it is a Jewish country. Every name, every landmark, every monument, and every trace of whatever civilization remaining there is still Jewish. And it has ever remained a hope, a longing as expressed in their prayers for these nearly 2,000 years. I won't go on.
I don't disagree, or
Okay.
I mean, but what I would say
Let me
is that
finish.
it's
Let me
great that you
offer you the
mentioned
source,
that
if I may.
but
May I
I
offer you the source before you talk?
Sure. Yes.
It was a resolution of Congress passed on June 30th, 1922, and signed by President Harding. And even though the U.S. was not a member of the League of Nations, they voted unanimously to create a Jewish homeland, which included all the land from the Jordan to the Mediterranean, from the Golan Heights to Eilat.
Which is great that people not living there get to determine what the country should be. And I would like to also point that it did mention that the Roman military pushed the Jewish people out of Israel and not the Arab people. It wasn't in unison with the Arab people, and that still is 80 years ago.
Let's bring
Today
the
is
history
today,
up to
sir.
date.
No. Great.
Obama wants a two-state solution.
Okay.
Israel accepted a two-state solution
Have you
in
seen
1948.
Have you seen the most recent two-state solution? It looks like a shotgun target with a shotgun shell that had been shot with a bunch of BBs
These things are negotiable. These things are negotiable. Obama also said the settlements must cease. They cannot grow. We cannot even allow for normal population growth within the settlements. You know, he's the first president to say that. Bush and his predecessors all said things similar, but Obama is the first to bring it up as a point that must be pre-agreed to before negotiations with the Palestinian people.
And
Thus-
Jay, what I have to say, and to Reza, thank you so much for this most interesting forum. Unfortunately, it has to end right now. We'll be back with another one soon. God bless.